Oh boy, another debunk. Good morning, class. Today we're covering this debunk by Project FM.
If you're wondering what is the debunk on Auren going to be, then let me tell you, there are going to be tons and tons of stuff on him, which would make him nearly unscalable.
So you see there's tons and tons of stuff. Let's see if there actually is.
In it. Note, it is just posted under a Reddit forum and not an officially published work. Remember this point. I will refer to it in later parts of this video.
But he is officially published and licensed under my own Creative Commons license, but also under the published company known as The Chilling App, where you can listen to a few of my stories for free. Yes, that was a shameless self-plug, but let's keep it going.
So now, Auren has different scales depending on different interpretations. Some stretch the absolute infinity statement to make him seem like the strongest character in fiction, which is already out of the window. As any, statements like this might work under their own narrative, but outside of it, in comparisons it has no value. So statements like,
You know what? He's right, but also wrong. I went on to explain what the character is from an outside viewer standpoint, but normally this would be correct, but in this case, it is not.
if you encounter such people. And finally, this last scale is a bit wild. There is a statement regarding Auren being above all. And in that there were three notable mentions, which were extended modal realism, V equals ultimate L conjecture, and Kabbalah. These three are wildly high in terms of scale. These terms are basically the pinnacle of tiering system, and being above them means being above the entire tiering system, so you know how wild this claim is. But there is a reason why I'm saying this is just a wild claim, and not a valid one, as these terms are just tossed around purely with the purpose of adding it to make Auren sound strong. There is no explanation for any of these terms and are just name-dropped for only the purpose of power scale.
Ah, there it is. Just so you didn't do your research. Issue is, my explanation of Oren, I made a clear distinction why apophatic beings or negative theology would be above these things. I made it clear how these things pale in comparison to something truly ineffable. If you want, I can break down why negative theology is the pinnacle of the tiering system, but let's move on.
So these are the scales. Now to the debunk. Where do you think Auren would scale after this debunk? Will he be outer-versal? Will he be hyperversal? Or will he be a Goku victim? The answer is, none of them. Auren will belong to the trash can tier, along with Anti-Principle and many others like him, due to shit tons of reasons. Let me show you the list of reasons why Auren belongs to the streets.
Not gonna lie, that made me chuckle. Well, alright, then show these tons of reasons then. I'm still waiting.
Firstly, there is something about the author of the story, Crimson Bayonet. I will say this crystal clearly. A verse which is made by a power scaler or someone who knows power scaling would never be considered for power scaling, as it is simply cheating. And why is it cheating, you may ask? Then let's take an example. Let's take two person, A and B, and let's say they both are appearing for a test. In the test, B beat A by a long margin and won the test. But there is a big problem. A purely studied for the test and scored as much possible through just the knowledge he had, which helped him get some marks, whereas B pre-hand had the answers to the question of the test, due to which he can score higher than A. So this logic is also seen here. A writer with knowledge of power scaling can literally beat all of the other verses purely by the fact that they already know top-tier terms of power scaling and can create a
This is a bad analogy. I wrote this story before I started scaling and debating. You see, I even made a post on why I made Oren the very reason it exists. This is what my belief on what truly is ineffable and impossible, what God is to me. Next point, please.
the power scaler or is knowledgeable regarding power scaling. But now, the next stuff is the confirmation that the author is 100% knowledgeable about power scaling of the top level, for sure. And that stuff is the mention of EMR, V equals ultimate L conjecture, and Kabbalah. This is the definitive proof that the author knows about boundless tier scales. No random guy is going to toss around terms like this in a story without any purpose, especially when there is no explanation or even reason behind the usage of these terms. These terms are purely used for power scaling purposes and are used to scale Auren to the highest possible tier and beyond.
Ah yes, my general knowledge on subjects means I'm a power scaler. I am one without a doubt. I'm not saying I'm not. But when I wrote this story, I spent almost a year studying these subjects and find the perfect fit of what my theory of God is. I finally found one through negative theology. I recommend reading about apophatic beings and then rereading my story.
Here and there, it still has a decent story, so it's not garbage in terms of writing.
Thank you, I appreciate the compliment. However, keep this in mind for a later point.
Now, next point that I would like to mention is vague statements. Usually the statements regarding Auren's prowess are not explained properly and feels like they are just added for the purpose of power scaling with no value to the story. The example for this is given already through the 3 high-tier terms that I said before, and there are many other instances like this. The vagueness of the statements makes it difficult for a proper scale to be made. Therefore, there are a lot of different scales based on different interpretations. So the vagueness of statements is one more reason for Auren's unscalability.
Vagueness isn't meant to be scaled. It's statements that are left for the consumer to connect the dots because my writing is complex and not in your face. It's constantly hinted that Oren is the avatar form of what is the absolute. The final part, albeit abrupt, did end the way it did to apply the idea of insignificance to the reader. It's to instill a fear that makes them understand they are nothing but a story. It's vague because he's the author and doesn't want to help the characters as they are mere parts of the story and that's it. It's supposed to represent hopelessness and desolation. And that's all that's left in the story, is just hopelessness.
Next one is no limits fallacy. The terms like limitless, absolute, and unending power, etc., terms fall under no limit fallacy. And the next one
Just say you don't do any research. It's pretty simple. These things, these terms, aren't what no limits fallacy is about. This is what no limits fallacy means. Please correct yourself next time, or at least do your research beforehand.
one is the nail on the coffin, which is OC fallacy, and I have been waiting to say this for a while now. For the longest time, I let Auren slide due to Creative Commons license, but from now on, I don't believe on that bullshit, so as it is not an official published story or series, it would be considered as an OC. There is a book, it takes quite a bit of money, and also a preset standard that would have to be followed for the book.
By all legal definitions, Oren is a licensed and published character through my own stories. Here's the definitions if you don't believe me. I can also publish a book through Amazon without paying a single penny. You don't know how publishing works, and it shows. So go on to the next point, please.
Reason why only recognized and officially published stories are only used for power scaling, and that is that, by keeping this criteria, all those effortless works made purely for the purpose of scaling, with no intent of writing a good story, would be declared unscalable. So this helps filter those uninteresting, nonsensical works with no objective, except for power scaling, as to publish a book.
You state these stories need an actual story behind it, but it's not just for them to be strong. Oh wait, you contradicted yourself. Roll the clip.
Here and there, it still has a decent story, so it's not garbage in terms of write scaling. And as Auren belongs to a story under Reddit as a Reddit post, it won't be considered as an official character and would be considered just as an OC regardless if he has a verse or not. Not being a part of an official work makes you fall under the OC department.
This is a bad take. Everything is technically an OC. The OC fallacy doesn't technically exist anywhere that is used for debating, scaling, etc. But even then, OC fallacy is supposed to protect things like Bob, the stickman who beats Goku. Characters were made to beat certain characters without any other reason or a story to back up why. AKA Bob the Stickman just being a stick to destroy things.
So the long run of the cosmic imposter ends here. The absolute is not seeming much absolute in terms of power scaling. But there is a big difference between being overpowered and being overpowered in terms of power scaling. Auren is for sure overpowered, but in terms of scaling him, many uncertainties arises due to fallacies and other problems, which makes a proper scale for him impossible. And that's why Auren is unscalable and not in a good way. The reason why...
See, you're just lying now. It's okay, you can be wrong, friend. Just next time when you debunk something, why don't you try doing your own research first instead of getting your idea from, like, other people who you talk to?
Yeah, that's what today's video was all about. Shitting on Oren for nearly 10 minutes. That's it for today, and maybe this year. So I will now meet you next year.
Ah, yes, but this was me, Oren's author, shitting on you for 10 minutes. If you make another video or another debunk video and it's bad, I'll see you very soon. In class, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or emotional outbursts, leave it in the comment section below. I love you all, and as always, class dismissed.